Next presenter is Okko Alitalo, and he is going to talk about science.
Thank you for the introduction and good morning everyone. So I just came from the Pharmacy Days, the Finnish Pharmaceutical Conference, to present my data, as I said earlier, and I didn't want to go through the same data all over again, so I want to do something a little bit different and talk about science today. So all the science that we do here in Viki campus, it's rather practical science. You know, whether it's closed-mouth lesions or immigrant mental health service use or even autistic fish, it's very easy to see like how it directly benefits humans or their companion animals. But it's not always like that with science. And so I wanted to illustrate this point and do a in-depth literature review about utilization of amusement park rides and roller coasters in healthcare research. And so I chose a couple of nice examples from the research about this weird topic, and I'm going to present them to you today. So our first story starts with the writings of Erasmus Darwin, actually the grandfather of that Charles Darwin you might know already. And in 1796 he published a book, The Zoonomia, where he laid out lots of different concepts, amongst others treatment method for mental health disorders. And his idea was that the mentally ill people should be spun around rapidly. And he actually didn't try this treatment in his own patients, but he inspired his contemporary Dr. Cox, who was a warden at a mental asylum in Scotland. And he built this device you see here, Cox chair, where the mentally ill people were hung from the ceiling and spun around. And Dr. Cox apparently saw that this is a good way to treat people, and he wrote that this is both moral and medical treatment for maniacs. And well, these kind of positive results, of course, inspired a lot of future research also. So this other Scottish scientist, William Halloran, even developed the device further. So with the device described by William Halloran, it's enabled to spin people in multiple different body axes and even higher speeds of rotation. And the treatments sounded actually quite inhumane. The patients were reported to have evacuated the contents of their stomach and their bladder during this treatment before passing out. And if you think that sounds brutal, I completely agree. Because it seems like this guy, William Halloran, used this in a borderline abusive way to establish some kind of weird dominance over the patients he treated. And yeah, people began to see quite soon that this is a very inhumane method, you know, to centrifuge human beings against their consent. So the treatment method fell into obscurity quite rapidly. But as the medical use declined, the leisure time use of these devices actually increased. So many writers agree that this is one of the starting points for the development of different amusement park devices. You know, these human centrifuges that you still see in the use of amusement parks nowadays. And as the centuries passed, we also learned what makes these devices so thrilling or nauseating, depends on who you ask. So we know about vestibular system. And vestibular organ, shown here, is located in the inner ear. It's a sensory organ that reacts into changes of acceleration or deceleration of the body. And from there, it projects into brainstem. And from there, actually, it modulates serotonergic and dopaminergic neurotransmission. So as a pharmacologist, this made the story interesting for me also, because as you might know, all the different treatments of mental health disorders are based on the modulation of serotonergic and dopaminergic neurotransmission. So post hoc, these scientists found actually why spinning these patients could have been useful for the treatment of mood disorders. And lo and behold, 217 years after the initial discovery of the idea by Erasmus Darwin. This article was published 2013 in Frontiers in Psychiatry magazine. They tried again, can use the Cox chair to modulate mood of patients. And there they built this contemporary Cox chair, which looks something out of a science fiction movie, pretty much. And they asked the patients to fill mood questionnaires before and after the treatment. So, as you might expect, the patients felt uncomfortable, agitated, and generally just bad. But actually, this didn't discourage this idea. There's still science going on around this idea. And the latest study I found was from this year, 2019, where they tried direct electrical stimulation of vestibular nerve, and they saw that young depressed patients actually alleviated their depressive symptoms without treatment. So the jury is still out if we can use this vestibular stimulation for the treatment of mental health disorders. And maybe after I get my thesis done here, I will start to apply grants from Linnanmäki and Särkänniemi and try if the roller coasters will be the optimal stimulation for this vestibular system. And yeah, if our presentation was a roller coaster, we would now be in this part of the track. One more ascension there, slight sense of calmness before plunging into the next interesting topic. Oh, it's stuttering quite a bit. There we go. And the next interesting part is, of course, using roller coasters to pass kidney stones. So we jump from mental health to somatic health. And I found this great article published in 2016 by these researchers. They essentially found out that many of their patients had demonstrated passing kidney stones after visiting Disney World in Florida. So they got interested and started asking more questions from these patients, and they found the culprit to be this Big Thunder Mountain Railroad roller coaster there in Disneyland, Florida. All of the patients had used that roller coaster. And so, of course, these guys were curious, like, we want to study this ourselves, but usually kidney stones are modeled using bovine kidneys. And it's quite obvious you cannot bring cow intestinal organs in the family-friendly theme parks. So they had to use other means to study this phenomenon. So first they tried to use models created out of ballistic gel, but the roller coaster proved to be too fierce for those models, and they broke down after just a couple of uses. So these guys went really into great lengths, and they developed a completely new model to assess renal function. It was created from this silicone gel and shown here. And it's a completely novel, more durable, more physiological model to test out renal function, just made for roller coaster use. So they strapped them into their bodies and went to ride this roller coaster repeatedly. And then they calculated the kidney stone passing rates. Here's a figure of the roller coaster shown here. First they tested out the first 7 rows, and they found that it's slightly better to use the roller coaster than no intervention at all. But what was interesting was the last 3 rows of the roller coaster. So there's almost medical intervention efficacy coming from the roller coaster inflicted gravitational effects. So it just helps to pass the kidney stones. And they went as far as to recommend some of the patient groups that are in risk of developing kidney stones, if they're eating calcium supplements, for example, to preemptively ride roller coasters of moderate intensity to just help prevent formation of kidney stones. Now you might be asking me why I'm presenting you this nonsensical research, and that's a good question. But my point is that there isn't always that clear of a goal in science. You know, these guys started from completely absurd initial points, and they ended up pushing forward the boundaries of human knowledge and developed something useful along the way. This unethical centrifugation of human beings resulted in great knowledge about human physiology, how sensory stimulus affects affective disorders, and of course how to create more thrilling amusement park rides. And then this using grant money to ride roller coasters in Disneyland, it resulted in a surprising discovery about beneficial health effects of roller coasters, completely new model of kidney function, and of course the researchers got to ride roller coasters with their grant money, which is kind of a career goal for me. And this to me is good science still, just science that doesn't discriminate against any different ideas, no matter how silly they sound. So with this presentation, I would just like to encourage you to have an open and curious mind. And as my great idol, great science communicator Carl Sagan once said, somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. So let's go out there and know more stuff today than we did yesterday. Thank you.